All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Rapid Fire Admin with Steve Pitcher. Most anticipated session, I feel like. This is an hour and a half long session. So if you have any questions throughout the session, please put them in the Q&A panel on the right. We'll get through as many questions as we can during the session. Otherwise, we will bring them to the live Q&A at the end of the day tomorrow. For any other comments, please use the chat function. That's open to all participants so you guys can have conversations in there. And with that, I will hand it off to Steve.
Thank you, Brooke. All right. Rapid Fire Admin, otherwise known as the session that I wish I never invented. This takes a little bit of time. It's very quick. I'm an East Coast guy to begin with, so I talk a little quickly, just naturally. So this is going to be good fun. So we're going to go through, roughly speaking, 150 tips that's going to be 90 minutes. At the last one I did this in 60 for Tug in Toronto. And that was fun. So we're going to take it down a little notch here and we'll do 150 and 90. So it's a little bit lax for me, but that's okay. Anyways, we're going to have a bit of fun here. And, some slides will have a tip. Some slides will have multiple tips. Some slides, a tip may last over 2 or 3 slides, depending on what we're talking about there. So, if you have any questions, please throw them in the chat. And if we have any time at the end of this presentation, we'll go through them there. So first thing I want to talk to you about is SQL services or DB2 services. So IBM started putting these things out in 7.1, roughly speaking. I think it was about TR5 or TR6. Anyway, they've been out for, 10, 15 years, give or take. And what these are, because still today, I still have people who have never seen an IBM I service. They're still kind of stringing, work query output. They'll do a query and they'll dump a file. Then they'll have a CL program that takes, the next file that you generate. They have iterations of files in order to build something kind of cool from the system. Or they're using complex means to get information from the system by way of API calls using RPG or what have you. IBM I services make that incredibly simple because they effectively bind up an API inside of a SQL script. So let's say a view or a table function will be basically calling an API in the background. So all you have to do is say select asterisk from this view, and I'm going to get back some information rather than having to call an actual API to do so. It does the hard work behind the scenes for you. So I'm going to have some code in here. Hopefully you can see most of this. These slides will be able to be downloaded in a couple of days. I think we're having ready for you. So I haven't hidden the code. It's not all images. You should be able to copy and paste most of this stuff and use it to your leisure. So anyways, one of the things that we try to find out is to determine what shares are in use in NetServer. So if I have a customer with a /payroll share or a /EDI share, then if I turn on authority collection for that particular directory, the directory object that is, I can then look at the authority collection file system object service, and I'm looking for client jobs or server jobs rather. So they're QZLS file and QZLS file T. That's your single and multi-threaded NetServer jobs. So they're connecting back to the server. The path name is splat or a slash, or it could be EDI, it could be payroll, whatever it is. And then I can determine what users are actually using that file share. So if I'm wondering, is my EDI share actually in use by people, or is it being used by anybody? You can find that out pretty easily by using SQL services. Previous to that, it was a little difficult to to find that information out. This makes it incredibly simple. When we get on a system and we want to see how healthy the system is, often we want to understand how much white space a customer has. And, when you're thinking about DB2 tables, the issue often with performance is not necessarily, the CPU has gotten slower. It's the tables have become much, much, much more larger, and you get to a new machine, and then suddenly the problem doesn't exist anymore because you have more horsepower and more memory behind it after the fact. When in reality, a lot of the time, you have a very unhealthy table. You might have a table with 10 million rows. 99% of those rows may be deleted, and it's taking up, 20 gigabyte of space on your disk. What we want to find out is how much white space every table on the system has. And you can, kind of get a subset of this by capping it at 500 rows or something a little bit more manageable. Get the top 500 tables. At that point, you can then reorganize those tables and get some of that white space back. First thing you have to do is to ensure that you have a good list. So what this is going to give you is a listing of objects, or tables rather, with a high amount of white space. So you can tell, where am I going to spend time reorganizing my tables? There's a little bit of background noise there. I'll deal with that in a second. What tables am I going to focus on in order to get the most yield of white space back? It's going to do a couple of things for you. First, it's going to make your backups go faster, because if I have a 10 terabyte table, that's 99% full of deleted records. Then I'm going to shrink that table down a whole lot. So I'm able to then save more space on my backups. My backups will go faster. Applications will perform faster as well, because if I'm removing 99% of the records, 99% are actually deleted. If I remove 99% of records, I'm going to get more incredible performance, because any RPG, if I do a set lower limit and a read prior equal or something like that, going back to some old school RPG programming that I don't do very well, but I remember them. If I do any table interaction, it still has to go through all that deleted white space, all that nonsense, in order to find an actual good record that I'm looking for. You kill those records, your apps are going to perform faster, your backups are going to be faster, and your system is going to sing a little bit more in tune. Whereas if you have a real unhealthy database full of white space, everything just appears slow, and it gets slower as time goes on. If you do a penetration test with me, you want to make sure that you have this buttoned up. Okay. If I get on a system on a white box penetration test, and I go into this in detail tomorrow, one of the things that we do is, it's a very old hack, but it's a hack that works very, very well. You put me on the system as a junior salesperson or something like that, who shouldn't have much authority at all. My goal on a white box pen test is to elevate my authority. The first thing I'm going to do is look for user profiles that I can use, right? So the user profile object, any objects that are not star public, star exclude, I want to know what those guys are. I can find out on a command line. I can find out through SSH. I can find out through, run SQL scripts, whatever. I would look for those. I would even use this guy right here and say, here are the user profiles. Here are the special authorities they have. If they have some special authorities, if they have all object, I win. I'm just going to hijack that profile in a matter of seconds, and then I will have all object by using their authority. It's a very cute way to do things. Another thing that's kind of cool is if I want to list the tables that have changed since the last save. So I had a question last week with a customer who he was curious about how his backups were running, and he wanted to make sure he was actually getting everything he needed to. I said, well, that's pretty easy. Just do the equivalent of a save 23 every night. But what they do is a weekly full system save, and then they just back up some of their user libraries during the day, every other night. So my question to him was, well, what if you have tables that are changing, objects that are changing in between that you're not accounting for? This little script is going to tell you that. It's going to determine what objects are on the system that have changed since the last saved. If those objects are not in your nightly backup, they'll be quite evident because they'll be in this list. If they are in your nightly backup, chances are they won't be in here because they have been saved, unless they're an object that's used all day long. Another riff on that. Let's say I want to see the objects accessed by adopted authority. Very important. Actually, I have a better script than that, that by the time you get this, I will replace this one with a way better one. Um, what I am more concerned about, especially doing pen tests, if I am on the system and I want to elevate my authority by adopting authority, by calling a program or running a command that calls a program, I would use something like this. The one I'm going to replace it with actually marries up the commands with the program objects to see which ones actually do the adoption. That way, I know every command on the system. If once I run that command, while that command is calling the program, um, if the program's in my call stack, I'm adopting authority. So I am able to then really quickly determine what programs or what commands I can use in order to adopt my authority in case, you know, you guys have all your user profile objects set to start public, start exclude. There are other ways for me to get around that. That's another one. If I want to see what objects were last accessed by way of all object special authority. When you talk about, hey, how many, or sorry, let's say this again. What users, if I'm trying to get rid of an all object authority problem, I have 100 users on my system with all object, and there really should be 30, let's say. Okay. If I want to understand what user profiles are accessing what objects by using all object special authority, this is going to tell me that too. It's good to know. If I want to understand what PTFs are loaded but not applied, okay, that's good to know. If I want to see what PTFs are going to be doing something on the next IPL, this is going to tell me that too, because it's going to tell me that if I'm looking at qsys2.ptf info, a great little service, by the way, where the PTF IPL action is star none, I know it's going to do something on the next IPL. This is going to give me a list of that. We had a customer as well who's looking, they haven't IPL'd in years. Back in November, and they wanted to IPL, and they're like, we're not even sure if there's anything going to apply. I said, great, just run the script, and we're going to see any PTFs that are going to apply in the next on the next IPL. Because in the interim, who knows what have happened in the last 3 years? Could have somebody downloaded a PTF and set it to apply on the next IPL and just hasn't IPL'd? It's good to know what's going to happen. If you want to check your PTF group currency, this is great. You can always do the tried and true work PTF group. That's going to tell you what PTF versions you currently have. This is going to tell you what PTFs you have currently, what's available at IBM to download. So it lets you kind of get a good level set on where you are versus where the rest of the world is, or where IBM wants the rest of the world to be. If you're at, if your CUME is 3 years, 4 years behind, and there's a new one out there that's, current, that's going to really show you how far back you are. So this is a nice little thing to pair. By the way, just FYI, if you're interested, if you have, dashboards and cool things like that in your organization, you can use this stuff to build your own dashboards or enhance your dashboards to tell you things about your system. It's kind of a neat way to get value out of this, because once people start seeing what you can pull quickly, you're going to be, tapped on the shoulder. Hey, can you grab this? Sure, you can. Chances are IBM has a service that you can pull information from very quickly. Users with default passwords. Now, what's a default password? Default password is, it's not really a default password anymore. Effectively, it's 7.5. But what it means is a user profile that matches the password. So think user ID bsmith and a password with bsmith. That user profile has a default password. Now you can run analyze default password, ANZ, DFT, PWD. That's great. It works great. It shows you some very basic information. You can riff on that. You can do a select asterisk from QSys2 user info where user default password is yes. And you can hack on it a little bit by saying, user default password is yes, and they've got a special authority. Or their default password is yes, but they haven't signed on in 6 months. Okay, well, maybe it's somebody that HR said we were hiring. We set up the account and they pulled out at the last minute. They're kind of orphaned there. So they're still sit there with a default password. They've never ever signed on, or they haven't signed on in forever. You can use a little bit of logic here just to give you more insight about some of these things. Or if you, kind of want to be quick and dirty about it, you just do a select asterisk from QSys2 user info and, bring it down to a spreadsheet and just put an auto filter on and, Bob's your uncle. Cleaning up the mess, detaching spool files from jobs. When we see customers with a huge amount of jobs on their system, often they still have spool files attached to their jobs. So when a job ends, it really doesn't end. It's still in the job table if there's a spool file out there attached to the job. Okay, that's good to know. So sometimes if a customer, is saying, well, how do I clean up some of this stuff? Because, our job tables are huge right now. We have a ton of stuff out there. Well, we can always clean up the spool files, number one, or if you want to keep your spool files, you just detach them from the jobs. The jobs end completely because they're detached. And now your job table goes back to normal and you still retain your spool files. It's a nice way to get around it. And by the way, if you're looking for spool output by going and doing a work job, looking for your spool file that way, yeah, that's fine. You can do it, but there are simpler ways to do that too. Doing a work spool file is going to take you there. Navigator is going to take you there. Looking at your spooled output in ACS is going to take you there. And then you can pull it down in a PDF format. It's a heck of a lot easier to use the new way than the old. Or yeah, you can use, if you're looking for job logs, and you can use the command work job log, by the way. If you haven't done that one before, it's kind of neat. Damaged object detection. When do you know when you have damaged objects? When you're doing a save 21, right? What happens on a save 21 when you find damaged objects? The system says, hey, we've detected damage, save's over. You got to go deal with that. You've got to recover something. You got to reset something. You got to fix this problem that you have, and then you can do another save 21. In order to determine any objects that are damaged ahead of time, you can run this little shell script here. Notice I didn't say Q shell script. It's just a shell script. It's called ARE verify, and it's just going to run out and look at every one of your disk units and determine if you have any damaged objects on those. If you find a damaged object, at that point, you can take care of it. Then you know without a shadow of a doubt that your next save 21 will not bomb for saved objects. This was delivered, by the way, with it was application runtime expert. It's now administration runtime expert. It's a free utility that IBM ships with the operating system. If you haven't looked at it, look at it, please, because there's a whole bunch of cool tools in there that allows you some additional functionality in managing your system. I like old school commands and kind of riffing on them a little bit. So if I do say display sys status with an assistance level of basic, and I'm never in basic, I'm always in intermediate. That's just where I'm comfortable. But when we say to a customer, like, how many users are currently on your system? What does everybody do? Everybody, without a shadow of a doubt, goes and does a work active job. They page down to their interactive subsystem and they count them up. You run a display sys status basic, it will give you how many sci.interactive users you have. Or you can just run this little table function in SQL. All of these, by the way, with run SQL scripts, you could just keep them. You could save them as little scripts. If you want one, just open up run SQL scripts, pick the script you want, run that sucker, and you got it. Speaking of ACS, we still, to this day, see customers using Access for Windows. We have a customer right now that we're doing and I'm pretty sure Access for Windows is the culprit, but they have encryption on their communications. And we're trying to determine how many of the SSL v3 connections, we're trying to find the nature of a bunch of SSL v3 connections they have on their system. That's very old. We're assuming it's old Access for Windows. So in order to do that, I've got some scripts to show you how to do that a little bit later, but we'll put some scripts on to determine what it is. Chances are it's just this old garbage client that you just haven't updated in 15 years. And the client itself hasn't had a fix back in 15 years. That's why it still supports SSL v3. So instead of downgrading their operating system when they do an upgrade to 7.5 to support SSL v3, which we don't want to do, we're going to fix the problem by identifying, okay, is it all Access for Windows clients? Yes. Okay, great. Replace them all with ACS. Now you can run a TLS 1.3 We don't have to downgrade the encryption negotiation on the operating system. Everybody wins. If you don't know what this product is and you have an IBM I in your environment, you are entitled to use it for free. Access for Windows is dead. Okay, it's gone. All right. ACS is a Java-based client. You don't need to install Oracle Java to make it work. You can download a copy of OpenJ9 or whatever, and you could put the JRE inside the ACS folder structure, and you just run it. It runs anywhere, and it's super dumb easy to upgrade. It's supported. There's so many different features in there. I'm sure I've got a ton here to show you, but I'm not even scratching the surface on them. Just little things like Control-C and Control-V working immediately with the utility. Yes, you can make that work with Access for Windows, but you have to make it work. This is just simple. I can do a Control-C to copy and Control-V to paste. It's slow. It makes my effort on a command line much, much faster. I can customize the cursor location after a paste. Where does it go by default? To the beginning of the line. That's really nonsensical. At the end of the line is where I want it to go. And you can do that here too. You have a lot of control. If I want to see screen history, turn on screen history and say I want to do some documentation. I'll turn on screen history, and this thing is going to record every enter, every function key. Anytime I do anything of value, it's going to take a little snapshot of what the screen is doing. That way I have a long list of screenshots that I could just mark up with some verbiage and then provide that to a user. So if you're big on documentation, screen history in ACS is great. Yes, you could get a little snipping tool and manually take the snips. That's just a long waste of time for me. I would much rather the operating system, the ACS do that for me. I mentioned using OpenJDK instead of Oracle. There's instructions literally on how to do that with ACS. It's right here. We have a PDF document that my colleague Nathan Williams and I would say mostly Nathan, put together a couple of years ago. The instructions are still solid. It's basically this, except it's spelled out a little bit more instruction-like, I suppose. Let's see. Access for Windows is out. So that means Navigator is out too. So Fat Client Navigator, as it's affectionately termed, is just old. It's old, it's slow, and it doesn't do half of the stuff that the new Navigator utility does. Now, this is not the Navigator for I from 5 years ago. This is completely reimagined and rewritten with more modern language and traditional Navigator, if you're not using the new Navigator, is full of what was that big thing? The vulnerability. It was only the largest hole in computing history, Log4j. The old Navigator is full of Log4j references. If there's anybody out there who is still running the old Web Navigator, you want to be on the new Web Navigator. How do you get it? Upgrade. Put your PTFs on. You'll get it. I can't remember the versions. Like if you're on 7.1 with full PTFs, you're not getting the new Navigator. But I'm pretty sure if you're on 7.2 and higher, you will have the new Navigator. Nobody should be on 7.2 or 7.3, by the way, here. Web interface, it's lightning fast. Every single screen on it has the ability to click a little SQL button to determine what SQL was used to build the context of what you're looking at right now. So for instance, if you're looking at the active job screen, it will give you the SQL on how to find it. So that means you don't actually need to be inside Navigator to check your active jobs. You can run that script using Run SQL scripts. You can embed the SQL in a Apache web server on your system or on another system that reaches back to yours and probe your system for information. You don't always have to use an IBM I interface to get IBM I data. That's part of the value of SQL. How do you get to it? Easy. Go to yourserver.yourdomain.com. Ideally, port 2002/Navigator, and you'll go in there. There's some cool stuff in here, like it has a global fast search. If you type in an English word, it will give you English results. If you type in an IBM I word, like work disk status, it will bring back some disk-related content for you. Just click on and you go there. This is great if you are training in new administrators who may not know the nomenclature of IBM I commands. they can talk to it in plain English and get what they want to have. Excuse me. Bookmarking favorites. If you've got some deep directories, if you have WebSphere in your environment, and your log directories are buried 18, directories deep, and you go there on a regular basis, bookmark the darn thing. It's going to be there for you. So you click once instead of having to go to your root of your IFS, QIBM, user data, WebSphere, blah, 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 to find a log file. Bookmark the thing, you'll find it quick. You'll have filters on every table, right? So if I want to look for username, job name, whatever, I could put a filter name. Every single table in Navigator has this for subsetting your data. Documenting your IP addresses. Now, this is let's call point of contention with me. When we look at customer systems and they don't put descriptions on their IP interfaces, well, you're really just leaving it up for my guess to determine what that IP address is. You don't want that to happen because I'm going to come back with you with questions, and we have to do a fact-finding search. Because if we need to end an interface, for whatever reason, let's just say it's an Apache web server or something like that, and you're moving it to another partition. Well, we have to end the other one first. We're going to bring it up on the other side, and we're going to need to end the interface. We're going to move the data. We're going to fire up the interface on the other machine or in the other partition. Great. It'd be good to know which IP address is connected to that Apache server. So put your descriptions in there, please. It shows them on this first screen when you go into your IP interfaces in Navigator. If you're using the green screen equivalent, the descriptions are buried on page 2 of the IP interface. You go in there, you put a 5 on it, you page down, and there it is down buried at the bottom. This will give me all the descriptions immediately. Less time I have to spend. I wish I was in person with all of you. I can say, who here uses WebSphere application server? And I'll get 2 out of 30 people put up their hands. And then I say, do you guys use shell scripting to update your WebSphere? And I'll have 1 of the 2 putting up their hands. Don't do that. Go into your web administration screen in Navigator, and you can update your WAS instances from here. It's flawless. I've never seen one bomb. Where I do see WebSphere installations and upgrades bomb is when people make mistakes on their shell scripting. Don't use the shell scripts. Just use this. Put your update package inside the IFS, run the update, select your WebSphere server, point where the update package is, and hit the update button. It's going to do it. It's going to handle the rest. And it's going to save you a lot of pain. I mentioned downloading spool files in PDF, ACS. Does that. Navigator does that. The one thing I have to mention to people, because still to this day, we hear people saying, hey, when I download my spool file, it's in text format. Okay, that's all right. Download and install Transform Services 5770 TS1. It's free. It's tiny. It's a little PDF conversion support. You put that on there, then all of your PDFs, all your spool files will be available in PDF format as well. Go Nets. Now, I just talked about the value of Navigator and how the GUI is cool and it's fast and there's all sorts of cool stuff in it. And to be honest, I have an hour-long presentation just on Navigator where we go very much into depth on some real neat stuff. But I would highly advise you, if you're running NetServer, which most people are, okay, so your file and print server on IBM I, get a copy of GoNets, download the thing, install there. I say that from the perspective of somebody who gets called into malware, ransomware remediation events. So if you've just been breached by some kind of malware and half your IFS is destroyed, your system is up, not necessarily that functional, we're going to recommend 2 things. First thing I'm going to tell you is to shut down NetServer to prevent any further damage. And then the next thing is I'm going to be like, well, because I don't know what's actually damaged, maybe Navigator is damaged. Certainly possible. But I can't go to Navigator. Maybe you're in a restricted state. You're definitely not getting the Navigator. If you get a copy of GoNets, you'll get a command line version of command line capability to review and manage your NetServer shares. Because what I want to know is, when I'm doing a ransomware remediation, what attack vectors do you have open already? That really narrows it down if I'm looking to see what's destroyed or what's encrypted at this point. If you have Go nets, you can find that out with the system in a restricted state. Disable net server users. See this all the time. People having to go and search for this stuff. No. Just go and type in disabled in your fast search in Navigator. The only thing that's going to come up is disabled users for net server. Bookmark it. Then you'll never have to look for it again. Use an updated SMB server. Okay. So how many times? When we do upgrades, and then, say we go from 7.2 to 7.4, and then a customer says, it's not working for us because we have shared a QDLS, and QDLS doesn't work with SMB2 or SMB3. Okay, now we have to download SMB back to SMB1, and that's not good. Microsoft's been, complaining about that for 10, 15 years to get rid of SMB1 and move to 2. Couple of things on here. They're coming out with new versions of SMB for a reason. It's from a security and performance perspectives. Okay, so if you're stuck on SMB1 to facilitate QDLS shares, you're kind of keeping yourself in the dark ages with regards to file share security. And in the age of ransomware and malware, that's not where you want to be. So what I would recommend is if you have QDLS shares, start investigating how to get those things or get the application to put that data in a proper IFS stream file location, a proper directory. That way, you're not sharing QDLS anymore through NetServer and or a QDLS subdirectory. And then you can move up your SMB version to SMB2 or SMB3. That will help protect you. And QDLS, by the way, is slow. Really slow. So your file share performance is going to get a heck of a boost as well, just by migrating this. IBM's been talking about this for 20 years, getting away from QDLS and then QDLS shares. We got to start doing it because we are a lot of the times being held back on SMB1 specifically to support QDLS. So when we're talking about modernization, funny how nobody ever talks about modernization add a QDLS into proper directories. I never hear people talking about that. So maybe we should. Line descriptions on IBMI. Let me do a time check here. There we go. Bottom of the hour. Hour left. I'm cooking. So every now and then, doesn't happen a lot, but every now and then, we have a customer who talks about their network performance being horrendous. Hey, I'm trying to SSH a file from our system to another system we got. And from this system, the performance is just atrocious. Why? And almost every time we look, it's usually the very basics. They've saved and restored their line descriptions since 1994. And it shows because sometimes you have a line description that's the main line description attached to an Ethernet interface. And it's set to half duplex 10 meg. Yeah, your throughput's going to be throttled if you're at half duplex 10 meg. So it never hurts to go in there, look at your line descriptions, and just have a peek. If they're set to auto-negotiate, okay, that's fine. But if it's auto-negotiating with a 10 meg port, then you're going to have some trouble. So it's best to have a really good understanding of what ports you're plugged into and what cables you're using. But it all kind of starts with the line description. If the line description is set to 10 meg, well, that's an easy answer. Now you just got to make sure the port on the switch is going to be set to go at a gigabit or higher. The cable can go a gigabit or higher. If that's the case, then yeah, schedule yourself a couple of minutes downtime. Power down your Ethernet lines, power down your line description, change it, power up the Ethernet line, power up the line descriptions. Line descriptions and the Ethernet line. Then at that point, your network performance on that particular adapter will be much, much faster. Plug in all your Ethernet cables. Why would you do that? Wow. Let's just say you've got a little PO5 box, not a Power 5, but a PO5 software tier. A little 4-core unit. Maybe you got 1 core active, and you've got, maybe you got 4 ports on a single network card. Let's call it 2 network cards because you're thinking, well, we want 2 for redundancy purposes. Oftentimes we see that. Guess what's plugged into the back of it? One cable for LAN console and one cable for the main Ethernet line. And that's it. You got 4 ports just sitting there on the other side. So you got 2 used on one, so 2 out of 4, and you got 0 out of 4 used on the other side. Okay. Well, we can do more fun stuff nowadays. So let's say you want to do something like link aggregation, where you have one port for your LAN console, and then you have the other 7. You can use 5, you can use whatever. Let's just say you want to use 7. You want to be crazy about it. You are going to super inflate your capacity for network on the system. So you're using 7 lines, 7 times 1 gigabit. Okay, well, you have, 7 gigabit per second potentially on your system to send out the wire to the switch. That's pretty cool. If you lose a port, the other 6 are still working. Users see nothing because the IP the line description is effectively virtual. So even on little PO5 boxes that don't have an HMC, you can still do virtualization, right? Link aggregation is super easy to set up, and it's fairly compatible with, most switching that's out there. However, main point of this is plug in your Ethernet cables. Why? Well, if you plug them all in, it's something you don't have to do later. If you have your system in a secure data center, you don't have access to the data center. Okay, it makes sense to plug them all in. Now, all you have to do is effectively a software move. I'm making changes through the IBM operating system versus having to go in there and run cable from switch to system and system to switch. So if I get a new system in, I always advise customers, hey, just plug them all in. What's the harm, right? Yeah, you're going to use up some more spaces on the switch, right? But in reality, I think the benefit may outweigh it. DB2 symmetric multiprocessing. What's this? Well, cool thing about this, it's free at this point. Well, it's with your software maintenance, so effectively free. It's a cool feature that's been around since V3 R7, I think. Back then, if you had what they call an N-way machine or a system with more than one core, it was a big, expensive box. And most people don't have this installed on their system because it was a chargeable feature. And in order to actually use the darn thing, you had to have more than one core, which mean that you were, a very expensive box. So pretty logical to determine that most people don't have it, and they don't. It's part of the operating system. It's an LPP, and you can install that. And what it does, it's kind of neat. If I have one core on the system, or if let's say I have 3 cores on the system. All right, so one partition running IBM I with 3 active cores. So 3 licenses of IBM I, and 3 cores running. If I submit a job, or if I run any particular job on the system that's database facing, what the system is going to do is process it by one core. Don't care if you've got 3, don't care if you have 12, 24, whatever. If you submit a task to the system, that task will be attacked by one core, period. If you install DB2 SMP on your system and you change your query degree system value, or you can do this at the job level, just to be a little bit more cautious, I suppose, rather than turning this on all at once. My system, I don't care. I just turned it on and see how it worked. I'm a little bit more cavalier when I was a customer to do things that may offer some good value. Turn it to star optimize. That's the nice good neighbor setting. And you can see here the before and after. That's actually one of my systems from, 10 years ago when I was working for a customer. Throughout the day, the system would be roughly speaking at 55% processor. I had 3 cores. And throughout the night, it would balloon to 85, 90% processor. So that's pretty hefty. After enabling SMP on the partition, during the day, processor would idle at about 20, 25. And at night, it would spike to maybe 55 max. Point I'm getting at is you get a lot of extra throughput on your system by enabling SMP. Now, your mileage may vary. Every workload is different. However, I would argue that this particular workload that we ran at the time, it's nothing strange. The history is from an IBM System 3 in 1970 using an old version of RPG. I have no idea what one. So it's an older workload that works just fine currently and probably still does today. Spinning disk is no more. That's correct. All storage now, SSD, flash, NVMe. So still currently, we see people putting SSDs in their system. They're expensive. You got to go to flash NVMe. Okay, it's faster than SSD. It's way cheaper than SSD. And, in terms of, even compared to spinning, if you're coming from spinning drives on a Power 8, going to NVMe on a Power 10, and the next iteration of systems coming out very soon, it's going to be lightning fast. I/O is no longer a concern. Well, for most shops, I/O is no longer a concern. It's going to be incredibly, incredibly fast for you. And very cheap, too. And, oh, by the way, since I'm talking about NVMe, before I go ahead, just so everybody understands what it is, it's actually like a PCI card. Okay, so there's nothing spinning. We put them in systems in pairs, so you mirror them. So for any reason you lose a PCI card, okay, which seldom ever happens, right? In case you do, the other one's going to pick it up. So we're fine with creating a bunch of virtual LUNs. They're called namespaces for NVMe. So we create our namespaces, like, I don't know, a 1.6 gig adapter. We'll carve it up into, 8 200 gig drives. And we mirror that to the other adapter. So, we mirror each of them over. So I'll have eight on one side, 8 on the other. If one card happens to magically fail, and I've yet to see one fail, they've been out for years now, maybe 6 or 7 years, the other side will pick it up. Users are none the wiser. Cleanup /temp. And I've also seen people put a /temp on their system. So this is not like qtemp, right? So qtemp is a temporary part of the operating system. If I, log into a green screen on a 5250 session and I create a file in qtemp, that lasts until my job is ended. And then that object is no more. It's gone. /temp is not like that. Okay. /temp is actually used by many software vendors to put their permanent stuff, things that may be quite necessary for their software to run effectively. So be careful when you clean that out. Back it up like any other directory out there, for sure, because it's a place usually where the junk goes. But I've seen a lot of times where the good stuff is also going there, and it's just careless programming. They're saying, yeah, we're going to stick this in /TMP. And it gets put there, somebody clears it out, and suddenly their EDI stops working. That's important. Make sure before you delete that or clear that out that you back that directory up. That way you could put, any objects that may be needed back in. Index Advisor. So I mentioned white space, making your database a little bit more healthy. Index Advisor is another low-hanging fruit type of tool that we find. So let's give you an example. I create a query on the system. I don't care, open query file, or maybe it's SQL, whatever. At 7.3, it's all using the new, SQE engine. So it's all SQL under the covers, no matter if it's open query file or not. But let's just say it's a straight up SQL. All right. And I embed the SQL in an SQL RPG LE program. All right. Run the program. It runs a little job, runs through a bunch of records, adds a record, does whatever it's got to do. All right. That's all well and good. However, while it's doing that, it may, especially if it's retrieving data, may build an index for data access. Every time it builds an index, every time you run that program, it'll keep track, or Index Advisor is going to keep track of every time that temporary index is built over and over and over and over again. So if you look in Index Advisor and you see it's a little bit of an art to it to kind of work with it. What I really care about is building a permanent index over tables that need it the most. Now, this is not for every single table on your system, of course, but let's just say you have a table that has it's a high impact transaction table. Probably it's a couple of 100,000 reads per day. That's certainly possible. Um, Index Advisor is going to keep track of all of those reads and the SQL used to hit that. And it's going to recommend a proper permanent index to put over that table. Now, is it $100,000 or $200,000 reads with 3 records in the table? I don't care about that then. It's not going to cause, me putting an index over a 3-record table is not going to buy me much. If it has, I don't know, 1 million records in it, you could bet it's going to be, and if the table is actually a big table, you can bet an index will probably make that perform just a little bit better rather than the system having to rebuild indexes every single time over and over and over and over again. This paired with the clearing out of white space on key tables, when we do performance work for customers and they say, hey, our system's sluggish, we need you to look at this. First thing we look at, white space. Second thing, Index Advisor. And in there, we're going to find usually, I'd say 9 out of 10 times, the cause of the slow performance for the application. Yeah. Make the point of we pay for the sins of developers from 30 years ago. Yes, we do. SQL Performance Center. Oh, shoot. I don't have I had a slide in here for SQL Performance Center, and I took the darn screenshot out. I apologize, folks. I will put that in here before I do that. Your SQL Performance Center is the third thing we look at. I'll just talk to this one because it's cool. So if you've never looked at the SQL Performance Center and you have ACS, go to your ACS window and find SQL Performance Center. It's like the 4th or 5th one down. Or it's under schemas. So your second section in ACS on the main window, and select your system, go to your SQL Performance Center. In there, you can do cool things like taking a snapshot of your plan cache, right? What's the plan cache? Plan cache is where all the access plans to your data are stored. After a system is IPL'd, plan cache gets filled up. When you IPL the system, plan cache is cleared. So ideally, what you want to have happen is a system running for a week or two, then take a plan cache snapshot, and it will tell you all of the SQL statements that are running on your system. You can sort by the time each SQL statement runs. You can see a whole bunch of information on there. So if you want to find out about poorly performing queries and maybe the reasons why they're poorly performing, the SQL Performance Center is going to take you through that. You can use Visual Explain, which has been in this, I think it was in Navigator for years and years and years, where you can look at the entire query from initial call to building hash tables to index creation to data retrieval and everything in between, any joins, and it will tell you every step of the process and how long each step of the process actually takes. Very handy when you want to find what's bogging the system down. We talk about temporary storage. Well, this is a cute little thing I use when we're, people saying, what's taking up this temporary storage on this system? I don't know what it is. Run this little script. It's going to list the different areas of concern, the jobs in the system that may be taking up some huge amounts of temporary storage. Not a bad idea. Just get a good level set. If when your system is running well, run this. And then you'll see what your normal looks like. And then when things may be not so normal, you can run it again. And then you can see, oh, this one's way out of whack. That might be the job that we're having a problem with. Helps your troubleshooting. Auditing your printing. Yep, we have a printing tip. A little swally here. So, little story. I worked for an ice cream company years ago, and they were enamored with printing. They loved printing. We had so many green bar printers at the company, and it was ridiculous because I had a green bar next to my office, and I used to hear this thing kicking off all day. And you'd go over and you'd look out the door, and somebody is there getting a big old pile of paper, And then they would go and take it to the CFO, who would go to the bottom page, look at it, see the things that he wanted to see for the totals, and he'd put his signature on it. And they would take it to our magical archive building, where paper would just go and be stored for the next God knows how many years, just sitting there taking up space as a potential fire hazard. Imagine 30-year-old green bar paper. How fast does that stuff burn? It's got to be very quickly. So I was curious because I wanted to understand how much we're actually spending on printing from IBMI. Okay, cool. Let's figure that out. So we just, use some very basic rudimentary programming. We use our audit journals. We're querying our printer output. Then we can determine what user profiles they are. We tie that to another table of what department they're in. And then we can attach a dollar value based on the maintenance cost of the printer, the toner cost, ink cartridges, all that stuff to determine a cost per page. Now we can really see how much we're spending by department. And, I tell you, you stick a report on somebody's desk and say, your department is responsible for $12,000 in printing this month. Yeah, they're going to take notice, right? So we went from roughly spending $600,000 a year on printing, little $200 million paper ice cream company. We went from spending about 600 grand down to about 220, give or take, just by providing a little bit of insight. So there's some cool stuff you can do in cutting down your printing. You can really get a dollar on that. Another thing you can do, find big spool file. This is IBM's command. It's not with the operating system. You have to download it. But you can download it and run it on the system. Now, it is the best named IBM utility ever because you know exactly what it's going to do. Find big spool file. I wonder what that does, right? Download it, have a look, and, clean up your system. There's also ways to do that with SQL. You don't need a custom IBMI command. This came out before the DB2 services came out, of course. You can find this. It's just a cool command. I like it because of the name, and it's kind of funny, and I use this for a little laugh when I'm in front of people. Anyway, PTFs. This is important, okay? Especially when I speaking to customers recently, hadn't put one on in, I think I mentioned, like 7 or 8 years. They're looking to go to our cloud. I think I mentioned that maybe in the last session. But the thing is about that, it kind of takes the more that you ignore your PTFs, the more invasive the process is for getting you back up to where you need to be. The longer your downtime is going to be, the more difference and changes that IBM has put into the operating system by way of PTFs and technology refreshes. They're moving into the future. If you stay where you are and then decide to jump 8 years, man, 8 years is 2 lifetimes in technology. So you want to make sure that you're moving at a slow, iterative pace. You don't want to be too far ahead, but you don't want to be too far behind. So it's very important to do PTFs. How do we do PTFs? Well, we have a bit of a cadence. We'll apply what you have on currently, permanently. All right. Make sure you get a save sys to capture those perm applies. All right. Doing that's going to do something very cool for you. It's going to give you an IBM equivalent of Windows last known good configuration, but this actually works. When you do that, it's better for everybody. It cleans up your system a little bit, makes your system IPL a little bit faster. So the first thing we do is perm apply everything. Then we do an IPL and we get a full system save or a save 22. From then, we'll put on temporary PTFs. I'm sorry, I have somebody at my door, and my dog is going a little crazy here. You'll have to bear with me. So we'll put on temporary PTFs, and then 3 months after that, we'll perm apply those temporary PTFs. 3 months after that, we'll put on new temporary PTFs. 3 months after that, we'll perm apply those, and so on and so on and so forth. It's good to do that because it gives us a couple of decent recovery points with every perm apply and save 22 that we take. The other thing it's going to do, it's going to give you a consistent application of PTFs where you are staying up to date, relatively speaking, but you're not on the bleeding edge. Well, how can you not be on the bleeding edge? Just put new PTFs on. Well, we stagger ours a little bit. We keep ours about 2 weeks behind what IBM puts out. We do that for a reason. And I think Nathan Williams, I think he has a full session on, PTFs somewhere in the kit. But from a I lost my train of thought there with that. From the PTFs, we keep them staggered a little bit behind. We do that because if there is a 0-day problem, if IBM has a defective PTF, okay, we'll know about it. It doesn't get to you. So when we do PTFs for our customers, we use our images, which are just old enough, a couple of weeks out to not be bleeding edge and to prevent, any defective PTFs from reaching your system. We do it nice that way. And but if you want to download them direct from IBM, you can do that. That is more bleeding edge than most of our customers want to be. So they like that little buffer zone that we give them. There is a PTF catch-all group. I used to like it. Ignorance is bliss, I suppose. So what this does, it pulls down all your group PTFs, whether you have it installed or not. So when we get on a system and we want to look at your PTFs, we'll do a work PTF group and we'll go down through and say, okay, that's great. Now you've got this, you've got that, you've got MQ. Okay, well, that's interesting. Not many people have MQ compared to other things. You have WebSphere. Okay, well, that's interesting. I didn't see WebSphere in your, Go license program list. As a matter of fact, I don't remember MQ there either. So it makes it a little bit confusing for people because you're loading all these fixes on the system when you don't even have the darn LPP loaded. So it's just sitting there taking up space for zero reason. So yeah, stop ordering this dopey PTF. And in fact, I would argue IBM should stop even offering this PTF because it's silly. In my opinion, it's silly. You should be able to download PTFs for what you have installed, and that's it. Nothing more. Break for the next slide. Be honest with yourself. What's this mean? This will tell me immediately. Every single customer system I get on, the first thing I notice as a security literate IBMI person is I look to the bottom corner of the system or the emulator window, and I see if I see this. If I see this, my next statement is going to be, how come you guys don't encrypt your communications from your client to your server? Because you just put a user ID and a password into the system, and that just went over your network in clear text. Do you know that? And oftentimes, they don't. It's getting better. People are becoming a little bit more encryption conscious now, but still, we see this way too much. It should look like this. Locked, unlocked, encrypted, clear. Okay? By way of example, again, clear text, encrypted. So if you look at your green screen right now, and you don't see this, and you see this, then whatever you just put into the system, whatever you pulled back, if you looked at the sales report, it's over your network in clear text. That's not where you want to be. Communication encryption is stupid easy. So you can build a certificate, assign it to your applications, and be ready for your clients to connect in 15 minutes. I say 15 minutes because that's, on average, that's what people do. In reality, it takes 5 minutes. It's nothing to do this. The time it takes, though, to set up your clients to negotiate encryption, that takes a little bit of time. So, for instance, let's just say we assign a certificate to all the services on IBMI, Telnet included. And we say, great, now we can participate in encrypting our communications. What do you got to do? Well, you got to go to every client. You got to go to communication, configure, and it's going to say, you want to change it from clear text to SSL TLS. I want encrypted communications, and you just save that configuration and you restart, and then you'll see this on the bottom right-hand corner. So yeah, you got to do that with clients. There's ways to roll out ACS en masse where you don't have to do that. If you have JDBC or ODBC sessions, there's a manual tick box. You got to say, hey, I want this to go over, 448 for, clear text ODBC is port 8471. Encrypted is 9471. So you make that little tick box change in your ODBC configuration, and now your ODBC is going to communicate from that client on an encrypted channel. It's very simple to set up. It takes a little bit of mucking about sometimes on the client, but the mucking about takes about 5 seconds. It's just if you've got 25 ODBC clients you got to do, well, that's 25 you got to do. I would argue it's time very well spent. If you want to see the level of communication encryption that you have on your system, if you're actually using encryption, good for you. You get a gold star. But what you need to do is have a look on the system. Go into system service tools, and you could turn a lick macro on, SSL config, and you can do connection counts enable, and you can turn on connection counts. So you can see what protocols are in use. You can also see what ciphers are in use. So if you are going to 7.4 or 7.5, right? So 7.2 or 7.3 to 7.4 to 7.5. 7.4 is the kind of the demarcation point where IBM removes support, right? Removes the default support for TLS 1.1.1.0 and 3. They're defaults in 7.3. They are no longer defaults in 7.4 and 7.5. So when you're doing an upgrade to 7.4 or 7.5, make sure, and we do this is law at Service Express now, because we do not want to upgrade somebody to 7.5 without knowing if they have any TLS 1.0 connections or 1.1 connections, because guess what? They're not going to be available for them at the operating system. You have to post-upgrade, go in there. If you want to downgrade it to use TLS 1.1 or 1.0 or SSL v3, you got to go into service tools again. You got to muck with your encryption configuration in there, allow those ciphers and protocols to be used, and then the operating system's presented with the capability to use TLS 1.1.1.0 and SSL v3. I would much rather run this advance and say, let's fix the problem. Let's determine what is using TLS 1.1.1.0 and SSL v3. We do that by way of trace internal. There's other ways to do this. There's actually a more friendlier looking way to do this, but you can use a trace internal command, and this is basically going to trap all of the encryption. You can tell which versions you want to look for. Say I want to look for SSL v3 through TLS 1.1. I don't want to get my TLS 1.2 and 1.3 connections because I know they're cool. I just want to know what the garbage ones are. And you can spit out a little report for yourself, which will tell you. The other way to do this, and this is, I'll make a note here to, there we go. I'll put that in there. There's a better way to do this. I would argue using your security audit journal. So you could turn on secure network socket auditing. So you can trap everything hitting your system. Now it's going to, of course, track your TLS 1.2 and 1.3 stuff as well. So it's a little bit more sledgehammer versus precision, I suppose. But it's easier to turn on and easier for me to filter if I'm looking at it through the audit journal through SQL. So I can turn it on through the security audit journal configuration. I'm turning on NetSecure, and I'm turning on the secure telnet if I want to trap telnet as well. And then I can just query the results with some SQL. And it doesn't take me much time at all. I can see what my totals are. And then if I want to see a more detailed report, I can say, give me all the stuff that's TLS 1.1. And then I get a list of IP addresses, a list of user profiles. I can see the nice formatted syslogging output that gives me a bit more information too. If I want to drill in a little further, I can tell what port it's using. So if I see stuff coming in on port 992, well, that's telnet encrypted, and it's telnet encrypted using TLS 1.0. Okay, great. What's the IP address? What's the user? We're going to go pay that guy a visit. We look at his client. We say, you're using access for Windows 7.0 or 7.1. Let's update that. Let's get you ACS. And we can solve that problem before it actually becomes a problem. Otherwise, if you don't do this type of work in advance of your upgrade, be careful. When you upgrade and you boot back up at 7.5, you haven't done the work. Your EDI might not function. a lot of things might not function depending on what is connecting to your system. You may have to do a little dancing on demand, and I don't dance well. I like to know what I'm doing, get it done in advance, boot up, and have zero problems for every single customer. I mentioned a couple of changes here in terms of protocols. I kind of mentioned all of this. I think TLS 1.3 has been. I tend to drift. So TLS 1.3 has been added. The defaults are now 1.3 and 1.2. As I mentioned, the other stuff has been removed. SSL v2, by the way, has not been just been removed out of the OS, and you can enable it like SSL v3. No, you cannot use SSL v2. Period. It's gone. TLS 1.0, 1.1, insecure by anybody. SSL v3 insecure by any. The only thing supported in this world right now is TLS v1.2 and v1.3. That's it. Some new cipher suites have been added at 7.4 and 7.5. I don't have the details on the new stuff that's coming out in the next release, but I will add that as soon as I get it. But you have some nice new ciphers to work with. Very basic tip, but I think this one makes a lot of sense. When you have software vendors, they're asking for QSEC offer access or a profile that's a copy of QSEC offer. Make them justify it. Stop giving this out. Everybody asks for it. I don't care if it's somebody who has a tool that does emailing spool files and they want QSEC offer. No, sorry, dude, you're not getting it. When you ask that question, why do you need it? And they say, well, we need it to make our software work. Great. Why? Explain that to me. When I was a customer, I'm sure that vendors hated me because I asked these questions. You have to, because if I'm going to give you a copy of QSEC offer, you're going to call it whatever. You're going to give it a default password, and I'm not allowed to change that for the rest of my life. You're out of your mind. You're not getting it. Too bad. We're going to find something else. So remember, always, you are the customer. And that is not said enough in this world. You're the customer. You have more power than you know. And you can just ask for vendors to give you reasonable answers to justify why they need to have a more powerful profile while also increasing your risk. Forget about it. Make them earn that. I would argue nobody needs a copy of QSEC offer. Period. Unless, of course, you're doing something that QSEC offer needs to actually do. The majority of people don't need it. I'll also throw this out for anybody who's a developer here is in love with all object. Developers don't need all object too, and I will die on that hill. There are ways around that. So, and I know I just irritated any developers on the call. You don't need it. FTP transactions, more encryption for your communications. Still to this day, there's a ton of FTP servers in clear text running on port 21. All right, sure, that's great. Ideally, you should be using something a little bit more nice, like SSH. SSH is a little bit better than that, okay? A little quicker. You can do key authentication. You don't have to be passing passwords back and forth. You can do key auth, and that makes the transmission just a little bit more secure. You can use OpenSSH that the operating system delivers. You can use the RPM version of SSH, which is a little bit more modernized. It's a little bit more, it's updated at a more rapid clip. So if you want to keep your SSH servers on the bleeding edge, you can download the open source utilities, or sorry, not download the utilities. You can load up the utilities for open source solutions on your IBM I, which is effectively a copy of RPM. So you can pull down Python, you can pull down PHP, you can pull down SSH or OpenSSH, and you can update those at your leisure. Couple of things here. If you're using SSH, if you're in a system and you want to do something with SSH and you use QShell, good luck with that, because QShell is not a terminal. It's a terminal emulator. You cannot pass user IDs and passwords correctly that way. You have to make concessions for that. So you might get tripped up a little bit there. Be sure when you start mucking around with SSH, you start using an actual shell terminal, which will provide you with a little bit more leniency. If you can't do that, or if you want to, if you need to use credentials in your scripting, which is unwise, But if you decide to do it, you can wrap that in a tool called Expect. Expect was built by NIST 100 years ago, and it works very well. And you can wrap SFTP commands and allow you to transfer files with a little bit more English, I guess, a little bit more common language, rather than using straight up SSH. I mentioned, better yet, use key authentication. Trusted keys don't require user ID and password combo, so you're not sending anything. You're just exchanging keys with a secondary system. If you have Apache web servers or any web server on your system, you could have Tomcat for all I know. I see that from time to time. If you have publicly facing websites on your system, I don't care if it's IBM or not. If you've never used SSL Labs by Qualys, it gives you a great overview of your encryption capabilities for your Apache servers. You can even download this stuff and run it inside the organization. You don't need to have a publicly facing one. You can, but if you want, you can pull this tool down internally and run it on your systems inside without using the public service. Encrypting your data, I mentioned comms. That's a given now. It takes a couple of minutes to set up. It's no excuse. If you need backup media, we can do SKLM. I can't remember the new acronym for that. I'm just going to call it SKLM because I don't care. I don't set it up. Nathan does. Encrypting your data on disk, that's super important nowadays. How do you do that easily? You get a SAN, right? You cannot encrypt the system ASP. Just can't do it. The system does not allow you to encrypt the system ASP. You can encrypt other ASPs, additional user ASPs, ASP 2 through 32, and then any independent ASPs, ASP 33 and onwards. So yes, you can encrypt those, but your system ASP, forget about it. However, if your system is on a SAN, and that SAN has encryption at the SAN level, and the SAN just presents LUNs to your IBM ITUs, well, the IBM I is none the wiser now, is it? So your disk is immediately encrypted, or can be immediately encrypted, and the SAN takes care of any encryption overhead. I like that. So if you have a requirement to use encryption for your disk, for your storage, storage or external storage, SANs is probably what you want to invest in for your next system, I would argue. Good friends at Townsend Security, they estimate 75% of customers don't encrypt. I'd call that 99%. It's that bad. And you can quote me on that, 100%. Q password rules. This is another security tip. Q password rules is not new. Been around since 2012, since 6.1. It's new because nobody uses it. Not nobody. I would argue that maybe 1 or 2%, maybe 5, because I've been beating this drum for a few years now. I haven't checked the latest Fortran Marketplace survey, which is an invaluable tool to see what people are doing. But I don't think it's very high at all. It hasn't bumped up over the last few years. I can't wait to see the next one, the newest one. That way I'll be able to know. But it has 2 cool things in there. If you change all of your older QPWD system values, so your minimum length, your maximum length, the other rules that you throw in there, fourth digit, special character, whatever, you start using the one consolidated Q password rule system value, you can do a little directive in there. One is called limit profile name. Guess what that does? It prohibits profile names inside the password anywhere. So if you want to have your password, your user ID is bsmith, and you want your password to be bsmith123, it's not going to let you with limit profile name. Now, that's your standard if I'm doing a change password command or calling the API. So if I'm an administrator and I use change password and limit profile names in effect, it's going to say, yeah, you can't do that. You're not allowed to use your profile name. However, but because I'm an administrator, I can then go and do a work user profile or a change user profile. It's a different utility. I can go in there and I can do a work user profile as Pitcher, and I'll change my password to be spitcher123 if I wanted to do something silly like that, which I wouldn't. It'll allow me to do it. That's what this one is about. I'll create change. That will ensure, I got FedEx at my door again, so hopefully she doesn't knock and my dogs don't go crazy. All right, we're in good shape. So all create change will prevent administrators from getting away with shenanigans like that, bypassing your rules. These two directives work used in conjunction with each other will kill the concept of default passwords. It will not allow you to go in there and do that. I'll give you another tip that's not even listed on this. What if I just go in and I want to change the system value, and I'll take those two suckers out and I'll go in and make my password whatever I want because I'm the administrator of the system and I'm going to not play by my own rules. I'm not going to eat my own dog food. Well, if you want to do something fun with that, you can go into service tools and you can outlaw security related system value changes. Somebody would have to come into service tools, flip that flag off, and then go back out, then change the system value in order to get past the rules. Change my password, and then I'll put it back so all the other users are bound by those rules, and then I have to go back. It's a lot of work just to, skirt the rules. And if you have auditing on, which you should, then those things should be tracked, and you should be able to hold people accountable for blatantly breaking the rules, not just, making your profile name the same as user ID. But by going into the system value, changing it, going to SST and changing it first, you're really going out of bounds in order to break the rules. At 7.5, new default password instead of DFT PWD. It's now starting on. Somebody can still put in, user ID B Smith in my password. I'm going to specify B Smith, but you got to try really hard to set your user profiles up that badly. You got to try really hard to screw up. All create change and limit profile name will solve that. I mentioned locking system security values in SST. This is how you do it, right? SST, take option 7 and set allow system value security changes to 2. That'll disallow it. If you have services not being used, turn them off. Right? If you're not using FTP, turn it off. If you're not using DRDA, turn it off. SSH, turn it off. When we do pen tests, I'm begging for you to have other stuff open besides Telnet. I'm begging for it because if you present me an ODBC interface, you can betcha I'm going to use run SQL scripts to try to break into your system with consent, of course. If you're just giving me Telnet and I'm bound into the Telnet box, right? That the only thing I can do and the only interface I can access on the system is Telnet. Great. You can put limit capabilities on my profile. You can put me in an application that doesn't allow me command line. You can lock me down pretty hard. But you offer me FTP, SSH, run SQL scripts, anything, right? RecSec or remote command. If you have any of that stuff turned on, you can bet I'm going to use it. You can bet somebody who's nefarious, who's not trying to help you, is going to be using it against you rather than trying to help you. So make sure disabled services can't be exploited. Pen testing. I harp on this point. I don't care who you use, as long as you use somebody who knows what the heck they're doing. All right. We'll talk about that a little bit later. This one right here, we have penetration testing every year. Never find anything. I wonder why. It's because they don't know IBMI. They're Windows consultants. They're Linux consultants. They have no idea how IBMI works and things. It's evident in the result sets they find. And how many times we've seen this? A customer said, well, we had somebody do this for us, but we really should have an IBMI person, and we do it, and they have somebody else doing it for the last 10 years, and they never find anything. The one things they do find, stupid stuff. They find, I swear to God, they come back and they say, you have Telnet enabled. Yeah, so that's how IBMI works. It's Telnet over, it's 50 data stream over Telnet. And they say, well, you should be using SSH instead. No, we just need to encrypt Telnet. They just assume Telnet can't be encrypted. It's a ridiculous conversation. They look at things like Apache track and trace vulnerabilities on the default Apache server and claim that's a problem. And then we get a big panicked email from a customer who's saying, we have a track trace vulnerability on our default Apache server. Really? Okay, great. Let's look at the Apache server. What's it do? It starts up and says, hi, I'm the default Apache server for IBMI. It doesn't do anything else. It's not publicly facing. It doesn't take any credentials. It doesn't do anything but present 10 words on the screen. Tell me that's a vulnerability. It ain't. If you're so worried about it, let's just shut it off. It doesn't do anything. Auto start, no, shut that thing down. It won't come back up again. In fact, delete the thing. Who cares? It's just a dummy web server for an example that IBM can have web servers on IBMI 20 years ago. it's important to know what the real risks are. So when we get on their system and we break into their system in 6 minutes, all right, and they've got another system, we hit that with 3 minutes because we know what to look for the second time. And they're amazed. It's not amazing. This is low hanging fruit. And we're going to go through that in my deconstructing a penetration test tomorrow. This is just a little teaser. But if you've been relying on non-IBMI people to pen test your environment, your IBMI included, and they haven't found anything, it doesn't mean that, nothing is wrong. I mentioned this stuff here already, what a generalist finds. Ransomware, talked about this. Ransomware is huge. This is all hubris. I want to keep this in here for the deck for you guys, because this is very much an issue. We're going to talk about this stuff. The one thing I want to mention in here today, when we talk about the IFS is not just your PC files. The IFS on IBMI is actually every file system on it. So you have your QSys file system, right? That's your RPG programs and CL programs and all that fun stuff. You have, QDLS, which is your old Office Vision stuff. You have QOpenSys, which is new kind of Unixy stuff. You've got your root file system, which everything else is underneath. QOpt. It's all integrated, which is called the integrated file system. I'm going to pass this through here. I'm going to go through here because I don't want to bore you, because I'm going to take through that more in depth tomorrow. Security auditing. Assuming you have your security audit journals running and you have the basics being collected, I'm going to give you a little bit of SQL here. Auditing with a twist. Let's just say I want to see all the invalid password attempts on the system in the last 24 hours. This is going to give you that. If I want to see, if I want to make this a little bit more fun, if I want to see failures for specific services, job name is this QP0Z SPWP, that's SSH, right? I want to see all my SSH failures in the last 24 hours. I want to see my FTP failures in the last 24 hours. You get the point. You can use your security audit journal with a little bit of SQL and very little changes. All this stuff here, the first 6-7 lines of code is the same. All I'm doing is changing the job name at the bottom. And it's going to give me some cool stuff. Net server connections. I want to see if I want to build a malware trap, right? DO events, object deletion events, right? If I see, 5 minutes goes by and I see 300 objects deleted through a net server job, file share job, maybe I can incorporate this in an RPG program and shut that job down. I know you can do it, because I did it. I'm not a great programmer either. I just, using what IBM is giving, it makes it very easy for rudimentary programmers like myself to build solutions like this with relative ease. If I can build it, I can guarantee that most people on this call can do this much, much better than I can. For upgrading, one rule: read your memo to the users. This is a bar iron rule, okay? If you're going from 7.3 to 7.5, read 7.4 and 7.5 memo to users. They're not cumulative. Make sure you obey the rules and you know what's coming down the pike. You may say, hey, Steve, I'm hiring you guys to know this. Well, yeah, we've read it. We have our own upgrade documentation based on this stuff. However, we don't know your applications. We don't know the nuances on your environment. Some customers, we know some nuances, usually managed services customers, and we're on the system often enough to figure it out. But we don't know the average system looking for an upgrade. Okay. You might have custom programs that depend on a certain command that's going to change. You better know about that. We advise you to look at that strongly. Should you or in terms of backup recovery, should you save your spool files? I don't care. You need a strategy. You do need to know, am I going to back them up, or I'm not going to back them up? Sometimes it really matters to people. Sometimes it doesn't matter at all. Do we care about spool files? No, we don't care. Everything's in journal receivers. So do we care about the output? Not really. But you need to have a strategy for that. Should you save your performance data? Hell no. Why? Do you really need in a system recovery to know how good or how bad the system was performing? No. It's a waste of disk as far as I'm concerned, especially if you're keeping years of it. If you're moving from one system to another, I'm fine with not even bringing that stuff over. Should you save your access paths? 100%. Where do you spend more time? Right? You want to spend a couple extra minutes on the save, or the much more minutes with the CFO in the door of the server room asking when the system's going to be back, and it's not back yet, and we're losing money, and oh my God, Steve, what's wrong with you? No, save your access paths in advance. Test your recoveries. I talked about that. I talked about starting the controlling subsystem, or I didn't talk about this, so I should. At 7.4, there's a cool new feature. Right down here at the bottom, the last perm, that's brand new. It starts your controlling subsystem or doesn't, depending on what you select as part of your save 22 and 23 at 7.4 and higher. I like it. Do you end subsystems manually before a reboot? I always do. Always do. I want to make sure everything is in a restricted state before. Let's say I do a controlled end. All right, power down sys controlled with a time limit. That time limit exceeds itself, it's going to wait and it's going to hang. It's going to hang. That's going to issue an end job immediate at that point and hang and hang and hang. And then once that time limit expires, system's going to IPL. It'll go down, and the IPL is going to be abnormal. So if you're applying PTFs, good luck, because you're not. It will not apply in an abnormal IPL. Make sure the system's in a restricted state always before you do an IPL. Don't rely on the command to get it down there. BRMS incremental saves, non-incremental saves. Hey, remove your object history when the media is reused, because you don't want to look through 15 years of data for stuff that's not even on your tapes anymore. Backups, do run your maintenance, do run your reorg. Okay, reorg your BRMS files, because they get massive, especially if you're keeping years and years of data. Don't ignore the errors. Backup programs. Okay, if you got an error, it says you got 176 objects not saved in, stream files that aren't saved. Why? If you're expecting them not to be saved because they're Apache log files, okay, they'll never get a lock on them. So you got two choices. Shut down the Apache before you run your save, back it up and restart it, or omit the log files. Errors should always be 0, because if it's more than 0, I know it's a problem. If you're going to ask me to tell you what the difference between 176 errors and 178 errors, well, it's 2, but the layman won't see that. And I won't see that, often, unless you explain it to me. Hey, it's usually 176 and now it's 178. Well, that's good to know. I would much rather it be 0. Proper accessible media storage. Okay. Huge. CEO knows a bank and the bank owner is going to let you store your tapes in the vault. That's great. But that guy is not going to open the door at 3:00 in the morning for your CEO. Make sure you have adequate fire suppression. And this, if a room full of people, they go, ha, because it's absolutely terrible. Check this one out. That's beautiful with the tarp and the hose coming down through it. I love the umbrella. Beautiful. Change your contact info. Make sure this is up to date just on your system once a year, whether you think you need it or not. Do a change contact info and prompt, and then you'll make sure that the right people are in there. Had an issue with a customer 2 weeks ago when I was in Wisconsin. IBM called me because I'm secondary on this contact information list, saying, hey, we can't get a hold of your customer. They got a disk problem. I say, oh, okay. And I'm like, who are you looking for? And they said the guy's name. I'm like, he left like 6 months ago. You need another guy. So I'm going to forward this message to them. They can call you. And that way everybody's all in the loop. Deal with your amber light, right? I call this the ambiance light. You walk into a server room, it just hits you like an orange glow. You want to make sure that this light is not on. Off is the default. Same thing with 0 errors. If the light is on and that's your default, how the heck do you know visually if you have a problem? You won't. Exploit your idle cores. You got, I don't know, a power 10 with 8 cores and you're using 1 or 2 cores. Well, you got 6 in the can that you can use for Linux. And Linux runs a hell of a lot better on power than it does on Intel. This is a cute little tip. Every piece of IBM instructions ever, when you're transferring data, is, hey, create the save file in QGPL and then blah, blah, blah. No. Just do a put save file name to /QSysLib QGPL save file name .save file. Done. Install RCAC, row and column access control. This is part of the operating system now, option 47. It's advanced data security for I. It's really RCAC. That came out in 7.3, where you can hide columns and rows based on the user profile. It's a cute security feature. And I mentioned helping your developers open source package management. This is how you get to it. In Access Client Solutions, just click, it's on the main menu now, actually. It used to be open source management, but I think it's right on the main menu as long as yours is updated. If it's not updated, tools, open source package management. Anyway, I have 1 minute to go or less. I think I'm going to leave it at that. I think I might have 2 or 3 slides left, and I'm just going to call that a day because I'm pretty much at the end here now. So I'm going to check and see if there's any questions in the Q&A.
There are a decent amount, but we have recorded them, so we can do them at the live Q&A.
All right, we'll do that
as well. So thank you, Steve. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Hop on over to the lobby to join your next session. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Brooke.